Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Eileen Munster with Coffee Fest, and thank you so much for joining us today for our exciting and informative webinar on coffee, COVID, and sustainability. Before I introduce our presenter, I would like to go over the format and some housekeeping items to keep in mind. All audience members are in listen-only mode, which means you are muted. We will be monitoring audience engagement on the dashboard and encourage you to participate by using the question pane. There will be time for questions at the end of the presentation. We are recording this webinar, and you will receive an email with a copy of the recording so that you may listen to it and refer back to it at any time. This webinar, as well as others in our series, will also be made available on the NGA Show website later this week. And now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our presenter, Isabella Pacheco from FAIRTRADE International. Isabella, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I'm excited to hear your remarks. And so with that, it's all yours. Take it away.
Hi, Eileen. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank Coffee Fest for giving us this window to share a bit of our information. I'll get started. First, I want to say why I'm here. So I'm Isabela. I work for FAIRTRADE International, the United States office, and I'm very lucky to be the person who leads coffee, tea, and wine, as I've had more than 10 years of experience on the beverage business. But now I get to do the fun part of partnering producers with brands, and it's just a great ride. I think one of the challenges to that is just how complex the supply chain of coffee is. And so I'm going to try to be as brief and make this engagement as interactive as we can. So as Eileen just mentioned, please feel free to be leaving your comments on the questions or the chat box, and that way we can start and make this more interactive. I'll get to all of those questions at the end of the presentation, but I just wanted to make sure you had the opportunity. Today, I'm going to focus a little bit on these 4 points. First, a little bit of a brief overview of problems before COVID. I think I'm going to try to be as brief as I can because I'm sure you've been hearing a lot about those. Then I'm going to add a little bit, the next layer will be on the challenges that COVID have added to those already existing conditions. And then the third and the fourth, more importantly, and I think where we're going to spend a little bit more time and hopefully where we can later have discussions on, would be on the coffee opportunities that COVID has brought or that are occurring now, and as well as ways to help the supply chain of coffee become more sustainable. So let's get started. First, I want to touch on the pre-COVID issues for the supply chain of coffee, and I do this because just as our bodies with pre-existing conditions are more vulnerable to disease, and we've been learning that the hard way with this pandemic. Coffee supply chain had already a lot of pre-existing conditions, which just got exacerbated. But I'm sure none of these are foreign to you if you are in any way connected to the coffee industry. You know, climate change has affected the production of coffee. You know, the price crisis, the prices plummeting have made conditions at farm level very, very difficult, making it very, very hard for people to earn a living income or a living wage. Deforestation has happened heavily because of climate change. People are needing to reach higher elevations in mountains. We have also the challenges of migration of labor. These were existing pre-COVID, and also how to keep the next generation in farms, as well as gender inequality, among many, many others. I think something that I would like to highlight, and I'll use this next slide for it on this is Conservation International's Sustainable Coffee Challenge intervention map, and they have developed this system where they highlight 15 points they think we can intervene as businesses, as producers, as any part of the supply chain of coffee. And I think sometimes we see all this and it can be overwhelming. But the way I like to think of it is that there are three pillars to sustainability. There is the economic, the social, and the environmental. And I think if we simplify it in that way, we can see and relate it to us. How am I affecting those three pillars? Those three pillars are the base to make any supply chain sustainable. So how is it affecting the environment? Can I keep that environment for providing to me what we need in order to produce? How are we helping the society that is producing this crop, and how are the economic factors, the policies, the standards supporting all of this, all of these actions? And so they're interconnected, but they are separate pillars that we can all have a part on. I think if you see there, it's very broad, but there are things like water conservation, climate, labor conditions, renovation of the crops, technology. How are we educating our technical assistance to farmers, and much, much more. These only became more and more intense when we reached COVID, and when the pandemic hit us. Um, the pandemic hit us in the United States market at the beginning of this year, but not in the rest of the world. Many of the other producing regions have been hit in different times. And this is especially relevant for coffee, because coffee producers and picking and harvesting and exporting happens different at different times of the year, depending on which region of the country or of the world you are in. So for example, when the lockdown started here in Honduras, which is the biggest exporter of coffee in Central America, they were at the stage where coffee was dry and a lot of it was on warehouses ready to be shipped. And so the ports were closed, the airports were closed, and it became really hectic for them to know, are we like gonna forfeit on contracts? How are we gonna get this out? Is government gonna react rapidly enough to let our coffees out? We had a very different situation in Brazil. Brazil was starting to reach its picking season, and so they had very many issues with labor migration. A lot of the people who are the workers who reached farms for the picking of the coffee were not being able to move around the country, and so or we're afraid to like be exposed. And so are we implementing safety measures? Are we informing and educating people with enough time or as rapidly for them to be able to pick the coffee? And so on and so forth happened all around the world. Market wise, there's also many things that's affected. For us as business here in the US, there was panic buying at the beginning. And so it was really hard to predict, are they gonna just settle with the amount that they have now after the panic buying? Are they gonna buy more? Should we be producing more and buying more? Should we just hold off? And I think everybody had different takes on it for a long, long time. There was a lot of unpredictable behavior and market changes with that. There was, on top of it, in many cases, at least I live in Washington, D.C., there were civil unrests happening right when businesses were opening to a very small degree, but starting to open doors as walkthroughs or things like that. And so that also stopped a little bit of the momentum of reopening and affected those. And so I think the part of the economic recession is the part to highlight here, because it is, in theory, the most challenging, the least one we have control over, and the most the one that's going to, I think, affect most businesses, if not now, which I'm sure you're all going through, it's going to affect them a little bit later. And so I have added a map here of the unemployment rate. I think this is one of the things I check all the time, because it does show where do we think things are gonna go, and so it's a clear reflection of purchasing power. So if more people are unemployed, less people are going to be able to spend that extra dollar on your specialty coffee or on that cappuccino that's great across the street. This is from Business Insider, and I think to highlight on the graph, you can see, I guess the most dramatic part is that on 2008 and 2009 was the last severe recession the economy has had, and we only reached 10% or somewhat 10% of unemployment. And on this year, we've reached almost 15%. And so this is the part where we have to question, okay, how are we adjusting to this? Are we offering maybe options to consumers that are not as expensive or smaller packages that they can, if they're if their cash flow is not as big, are they being able to buy little by little as consumers? Has this affected? Like, I think it's something very important to have a look at. Um, but it's not something that we should fear of, because then again, we have to push through and make our businesses profitable. Um, and I think with that, I would like to open up to the opportunities that COVID has opened. I do think all crises create opportunity, and turning into those crises and those opportunities into being able to do good for others is something that can be amazing. I think all around the country, we've seen how people are much more invested in their community. We're seeing consumers care about not only what they put on their bodies because they're more concerned about their health, but also about where is my product coming from, how is it getting produced, who's producing it. This has made also consumers force companies to be a little bit more intentional and like walk their talk, which I think in general is a great thing for a society to start building up. I think the it opened also another gateways for perhaps smaller businesses that didn't have such a wide grasp. People are more aware of their community coffee shops, which is great. There's also big opportunities for retailers to expand on their e-commerce. Also for smaller brands to use social media as people are spending more and more time on their phones and on their computers. And so I think in all of that was great opportunity. I think the biggest has been, and the biggest overcome that we've done through COVID as a coffee industry was the scare of like, are they going to stop drinking coffee? Are they going to stop seeing it as something healthy? Are they going to start seeing it as a luxury instead of an essential, which it's been for the American consumer? And thankfully, perhaps like a week ago, NCA let out some of their reports, and I'll share a little bit of the summary with you guys. Which states that 75% of coffee drinkers have not changed their coffee consumption at all during COVID. So this means we're still drinking as much coffee as we used to. Of course, what COVID has affected are the habits of people consuming coffee. And so, yes, there is less espresso based drinks getting consumed, but it's been replaced with drip, and the coffee consumption is still around 3 cups of coffee. 6 in 10 Americans drink coffee every day. 7 of 10 Americans drink coffee at least once or twice a week. And although, of course, restaurants are the ones being the most affected with their market being dropped 50%. We can see online purchases going up 57%. We see apps sales going up 63%. We've seen drive-throughs sales going up for 13%. We see coffee shops still getting a lot of business. I've not only from what I read, but also what I see on communities as I have had to move around the country. And we have licensees all over the map. I see our friends from Kaladi in Denver, Colorado. They say our bags are increased because now people want to buy local. People want to know where their coffee's coming from. And so I think a lot of businesses greatly have pivoted into either having more presence online and also having more more local presence. I think one of the other movements I've seen is supermarkets or local supermarket chains sourcing more from their local roasters, from their local coffee shops. People want to take that walk to escape a little bit of their routines in lockdown to their coffee shops. Coffee shops have adapted in ways. I think the ones that have been more successful are the ones who have adapted their stores to be just walkthroughs. I've seen a lot of the ones here in the northeast of the United States having windows for pickups. Um, and if I can leave you with any hope around all of this, is that obviously COVID's not going to last forever and we're going to get through it. But I think there are key findings now that we've been in this state of pandemic for now. We're entering our third quarter, that the consumption is still stable. And so it is, if we haven't jumped on the wagon of exploring different ways to maximize our online presence and our drive-through walk-through services, then we should. I think the other aspect to that is the online purchases. A lot of supermarkets that are local or smaller chains have also had a hard time with the delivery as they don't have bigger structures. But I've seen many have options to where you can send the order in and the shop, although they can't deliver it to you, they'll have it ready for you, um, and so on and so forth. I could go into specific examples, but I would love to know through your questions, perhaps in the future, if this is something that is of interest, I can share, and if perhaps you want to discuss one-on-one specifics on what your business is doing and how it's adapting and how it can become more sustainable. I'm more than open for those as well. So also in addition to this, I wanted to add there are the aspects of if I want to make a differentiate my business and within this, what am I doing to make not only a better impact for my business, meaning how am I selling more, but how am I differentiating myself, as well as how am I contributing to the supply chain that sustain my business. Again, going back to what I said at the beginning, COVID has shed a light on how vulnerable the system is. It's shed a light on all those pre-existing conditions even more. And so it's almost like walking a tightrope. How long are we going to be able to keep the coffee as we do? We know that we've even on pandemic we've proved that coffee is going to be on demand. And so how are we going to keep coffee being something affordable, and how are we going to keep a sustainable supply chain happening, or how are we going to create a more sustainable supply chain for coffee? And there are many solutions, and here's where part 4 comes. It's how we can help. There's definitely not a silver bullet, and there's many ways you can help not only you, but like not you as a business, but the environment, locally. But there's also something where you as a business, regardless of your size, of your place in the supply chain, you also need to make great great sacrifices and need to be focused on how am I selling my product on your craft. And so this is where my recommendation comes in, which is certification. That's what I do. And so why I want to speak a little bit to why you should certify and label your coffee, and why this should be something important. I think as a business, again, you don't have necessarily the time to spend specifically on all of this. And so I think certification is a simpler way to know without having to do all your homework, where you're sourcing, how you're sourcing, getting incredible, not only marketing material for sure, on how you can speak about, but like stories of impact and how you're contributing back to that supply chain, but also, I mean, the ethical part of it, knowing that you are indeed supporting a system or supporting um, more sustainable practices in order to get that green coffee, grounded coffee into your business. I have another slide that I would want to show you. And these are a little bit of the areas of impact. Remember that I mentioned there was three pillars. There's an economic, a social, and an environmental. Um, the certification I work for is FAIRTRADE International. And I think a lot of the fair trade movements and a lot of the certifications focus on different things, which is great. And we support, and I, as especially coming from a farming family, support most of the certifications. I think all organizations are trying to do and help in the best way they think they can. I support this particular certification, I think, because they do have and cover the three pillars. I think they've done a great job in regulating uh, the the harmful chemicals that our children are exposed to at their homes when they live on farms. They've done a great work with reuse of water and reduction of water waste. Um, I think most importantly, there's that social aspect that they're really good at, bringing into our communities education. Um, Also, and I think most importantly, it is a system that empowers the people in the supply chain. This is not a charity. It's something that creates partnerships, creates business, and the same businesses feed back the opportunities into the community. The farmers get a say. One of the things that this certification is differentiated from others is that 50% of the board creating the standards is also part of making the decisions for the organization, and so farmers are part of that. Both businesses and farmers are getting heard when the minimum prices are getting negotiated. Both are getting heard when they're talking about labor standards and what is expected of not only at farm level, but at factory level. And so that's one of the main reasons why I support this. I think in another aspect of it, as a business, it is great to know um, with clarity where you're sourcing your coffee. I think there is some integrity into that. There is value, not only because we are the closest certification to organic, and I can get into why it would be very hard to become fully organic for many, many farmers and the cost that involves. But there is great reduction of the chemical use. You know where the money is going, and you also know how much you're impacting as a business. The other aspect of getting to know and getting material in order to sell your business better, as well as just knowing that you're doing the right thing and that you're building a more sustainable supply chain for the future of coffee. Um, Closing that, I will say this is a bit of our fair trade coffee report for this year. This is going to be available to you guys in the recording, but also I hope you get a chance to read it a little bit. It is how we use premiums, which is the money generated for the producers to reinvest in their society. It talks a little bit about how many people are affected, the areas in the world that we work with, um, and many other more. I also have tea reports if you also have tea within your businesses. And I really, if there's anything I can leave you with from this presentation, I would want to leave you with the fact that you do have a lot of impact in the coffee supply chain. This is probably a very big low for all of us that participate in this business, but we are hopeful because we have resilient people on the ground creating and cultivating this coffee, but they do need help, and we do need to maintain our beautiful planet that is letting us harvest this crop, and we also do need to create economic stability for all of the supply chain. If you have any questions, again, from any of the things that I've spoken to, please put them on your chat now, as we'll be opening questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, Isa, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. And as Isabella mentioned, please use the question pane. You'll see, you have sharing, dashboard, audio, etc. You have a question pane, so please type in your questions there. And I do have one already. So one of our attendees is asking, if planning on opening a new shop next year, do you think it would be best to wait until the fall when maybe things will be back to normal? Trying to figure out if it makes sense to open at this time when people are still going out less.
Wow, that's a tough question. Meaning, I think it depends on your viability. I mean, there's many factors that can affect this. How strict the place you're at or where you're building your shop is, and so are there being extreme restrictions? Are you planning your layout of your shop to be something people can walk to without having a lot of interaction? I think if it's a shop, which I'm sorry, Eileen, was it a shop or just business?
A cafe, yep.
Oh, a cafe. Okay. So yeah, I think I would also make sure that I am connected to many of the delivery platforms, things like Uber Eats and DoorDash. I know they can take up a big percent of the margin, but I do see those as the gateways to sustaining the business right now. Perhaps if you can't hold off until after the fall, I think we'll have more clarity. Also, you know, are happening, which, if I can say anything, go vote. Um, and then we would need to know, like, that's all going to affect how this pans out and what the restrictions are going to be after the fall. So um, I wouldn't hold off too long because I do think we need to just push forward, but I would think on e-commerce, I would think on deliveries and drive-throughs as something very essential for businesses and cafes right now.
Great. That's great insight. Thank you. So what does sustainability mean to consumers? And is it still important in this COVID era?
So our organization is based off on in Germany. And so a lot of like the key principles were very much based on social justice, as social justice in that region of the world is very important, especially after colonization and all these things. I think for us in the American market, which behaves very differently, the sustainability means something. We take the word as something more literal, which is, can this be sustained throughout time? And so that's why we try to explain how these things need to have, like, the three key pillars are part of making sure just business can be resilient. How am I going to keep getting that good quality coffee, green coffee, to roast on my shop? And that's why we need to offer the compostable items. That's why we need to recycle in our shops. That's why we need to reduce the water waste. That's why we need to reduce the energy consumption, basically our carbon footprint. And if any of the people listening are wondering, well, I don't know what my carbon footprint is, or please reach out. There are many tools on the internet where you can just type in some information and it can populate it for you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great. So can you share with us some ways that both roasters and cafe owners can sort of tell their story about the coffee journey? I know that's important to consumers to know where the coffee came from, but how do we do that? How do we do a better job of telling that story?
So If you have a certification, it could be very easily traceable. Sometimes when you don't have, or perhaps you don't move a lot of volume, it becomes a bit more challenging. But I do invite people and coffee shop owners especially. But even if you have a bigger brand or a bigger line, or you have a private line on retailers, to question your manufacturers or your traders, where is this coffee coming from? Most coffee is pretty easy to trace, at least to the level of a co-op, meaning a group of farmers or a region within a specific country. And it is very important not only for us as businesses to know, but as consumers to know. Consumers want to know because this way you can know exactly who is this affecting? Where's your money getting put? But consumers want to know also, what are the practices used in that farm? Is it women owned? What am I supporting with my purchase? And there are many, many ways to go about this. But if you do challenge and try to look into your supply chains, I'm sure in any means, if you contact these people, you'll get stories. I think it's very important to start speaking about these things on your packaging. It's very important to start thinking about these things on your social media and also on your presence online, with whether it's a website or simple posts on a Facebook page.
Great, thanks. And you went through briefly some ways that businesses can become more sustainable. Can you just give us some of the low-hanging fruit? What are some of the easiest ways that both roasters and cafe owners can reduce their carbon footprint?
Right. Well, first, my first suggestion is try to measure it first, because that way you'll know where you're putting most of your carbon footprint. Secondly, I think there are very easy ones: the energy consumption, the water consumption, and the recycling. I think this is the U.S. is, I think, on the top 3 countries for food waste, and that's very, very alarming. We're also a very big country, but we should start managing ways to reduce our waste. And so I think wasting water, wasting energy, and wasting on the trash that we produce is very key. And it's something that, with just a little bit of effort, putting the 2 baskets for trash in your shop, making sure and informing people um, that, they don't need to like use the water in certain ways, even if it's just an educational part of your cafe. I think that's the easiest way to get you started on a more sustainable part of being a more sustainable part of the supply chain.
Great, thank you. And I don't see any other questions in the chat box, but Isabella has left her email address there. So please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions or looking for more information. I'm sure she would be happy to help you out. So Isabella, thank you so much. That was very informative. I learned a lot and very much appreciate your time and your willingness to share your expertise. And to
Thank
our
you, Eileen.
attendees, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I hope to see you at Coffee Fest events in 2021 in person. And in the meantime, hope that you have a wonderful afternoon. And this concludes our webinar. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.